tell us about how you got involved in the Historical Society.
Okay, this had to be back in 2001 or 2. The community news actually started a whole new section on Old Town. And the sales rep called on us, for advertising sales, and in the course of the conversation discovered that I'd been born and raised in O'Fallon, and by then we were in the minority already because the city had grown so much. So she encouraged me to write an article on Old Town, and I did. And over the next few years, one article turned into 50. And in the course of that, I interviewed a lot of people, because I didn't start on this because I was any expert on O'Fallon history. In fact, it was quite the opposite. So I had a lot to learn. So I enjoyed interviewing people and hearing their stories and learning. And Cheryl Hibler, a friend of ours, encouraged us to get involved in the Historical Society, and we did, which went into the sesquicentennial and all that gathering of information. So it's just been a natural progression. Probably in the process of working on the book that we put out for the sesquicentennial. That was the first step in really organizing, because I found out very quickly that not a lot of information had been accumulated on O'Fallon history, and what they did have, no one had ever organized it in any respect. So that was the beginning of the process, putting the book together. And then, our dear friend Raleigh Jessup passed away, and his son, Kenny, came into our office one day with about 6 huge boxes full of stuff that was in Raleigh's basement. And we started by going through literally a mountain of newspapers, which is the worst medium for saving anything. So we clipped articles and then we copied them and started a file. Then we
just be a paper file, just in a folder, and that's all you had.
Just a folder in a file cabinet, right. And then the next step was to take somewhere between 500 and 600 documents. So we cleaned all of those by hand, and in keeping with archival procedures, and then encapsulated them. But we also then digitized everything and spreadsheeted it, labeled it, and all that. So our ultimate goal is to get all this stuff digitized so that it can be put into a searchable database.
And some of that history is no longer here, and then there's stuff like Aunt Rosie's house right down on Church Street. Isn't that a heartbreaker?
That's a yeah.
Take a minute.
The day that house burned, I didn't think they'd be able to save it, but I was hoping and hoping and hoping. And we're not one of those, river towns with all the brick buildings that have survived, 200-300 years. But to think that our history is just in our buildings would be foolish. Our history is in our stories. Civic Hall is another great story. The proceeds from the centennial in 1956 were used to build station number 1, fire station number 1, which is on Elm Street. Of course, it originally didn't look as large, wasn't as large as it is now. And Civic Hall. Like I said, there was no city staff at the time. So if they needed a street sign, or the streets needed oiled, or because most of them were, a lot of them were still dirt roads, they just did it, whatever needed done. And I think that's what's so important about this, because we live in an age now where we've gotten more sophisticated, and that's good. But as a citizen, we rely on city staff and municipal services to build our town and take care of it for us. And I just think it's a wonderful thing for kids to realize that, this town didn't just fall out of the sky somewhere. It was built.
Even some of our history is going away, some of it is coming back. We've got the fort.
Right.
In Zumwalds Park, that's coming along fabulously.
Yes, that's exciting to see. It is.
And that was one that was started by our good friend Raleigh Jessup. That was his baby.
That was his passion. That's why when you pull into Fort Zumwalds Park, the street sign says Jessup Drive. Yeah. He wasn't the first to advocate for the rebuilding of the fort. That goes all the way back to Miss Marcia Williams. She was a member of the Daughters of the War of 1812, and they began advocating for the rebuilding of that fort in the 1920s. And it continued to fall down. And Raleigh, bless his heart, I know, you know, I'd just give anything if he was still here to see the progress, although he's watching it. He was right. He observed it's probably a good thing that we actually are getting this accomplished when we did in the order that we did, because the archaeological digs that we had done revealed so much information to us that potentially kept us from doing it not as accurately as we are now.
Okay, where do you think the O'Fallon's historical site is going from here?
Organization cycle. And one of the things I hope for is that I can get done what I want to get done so that they don't need me here anymore. You know, I mean, I want all of that stuff, all that information, all those photos thoroughly organized and accessible. There's always a new crop of people to come in, and I think, you know, hopefully as we get in the future, if we get Crickle House up and running, I think the historical aspect of town will be more visible again and maybe inspire more membership. In fact, I really get jazzed when somebody joins the Historical Society that's new to town, because I just think it's so wonderful that someone new would be so willing to embrace O'Fallon's history. To me, that's the best.